Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Today is Monday. It is July 31st, as a matter of fact. Is that actually correct? I'm just double-checking myself because I'm pretending that it is Monday morning, July 31st, and that I am sitting at the desk at the luxury, comfortable world headquarters of Kagro in the Morning. That would be my fantastic kitchen. It's a little bit, we're on our way to luxury. I think we like to build our way slowly to this thing. In fact, though, I am out of town and recording a podcast at a remote, undisclosed location for the first time in I don't know how long. And our new audio apps make it that much easier for us to actually pull this trick off. Thanks, Tom, for setting us up. And our first test drive of this happens as we're out of town and visiting the in-laws. And I wasn't really sure, wasn't 100% positive we were going to have the kind of robust internet connection that we really need to make sure the show goes on uninterrupted from here. So rather than take that chance, I am instead taking the chance that nothing ultra spectacular or weird, and this is a bad bet, happens on Saturday night or Sunday that makes our Monday show so out of date and so incongruous with what's happening in the world at the time. Well, we'll wake up and see. I guess if there's a really true wacko emergency, we could give it a try. And if the thing doesn't work, we can always roll the tape. But I thought this instead would be a good opportunity to bring you up to date on some of the weekend news, which I often miss by the time Monday rolls around, and keep you current and keep you happy with some new content on a Monday morning. I know it's difficult to wake up to a rerun. It's difficult for me to leave you guys with a rerun when there's so much going on. There's lots that happened on Friday and Saturday that we can catch up on, plus a lot of good, interesting, evergreen type stuff that's been shared with us by a number of our listeners that's always waiting in the wings, or in pocket anyway, and that we never seem to get to. But let's see, the hot topic of the early weekend was whether or not, I guess we could put it this way, whether or not we should drop the zombie moniker on zombie Trump care just yet, and whether we were celebrating prematurely, if we were celebrating. Remember, we were admonished not to celebrate, but to feel some relief. But nonetheless, probably some of us were subconsciously celebrating, and I would like to know who, because it turns out that the zombie may, in fact, be back. As it turns out, the hot topic, I was going to say it this way, on Friday night into Saturday morning was, it seemed to center around a Reddit thread. I'm not a Reddit reader, or a Redditor, as they like to call themselves, I think. Anyway, I think that's what the kids say these days. Dan Lawson shared this with me via Twitter, and he sent me this, and he just basically said, is this correct? Because what was circulating was, let me bring it way up close here so my old eyes can see this thing. He sent me a tweet from Steve Simitzis. It's my best guess at his name, Simitzis, who tweets as S5, which suggests to me, I don't know, that's a great Twitter handle to have grabbed early on, I guess. I don't know. It's nice and short. Anyway, it's interesting. Co-founder #climate, it says. So how about that? And a member of the resistance. Anyway, I don't know if this is his thread or whether he just grabbed it off of Reddit, but Dan wanted to know if this was correct, and I guess he tweeted this to me, this is late, like 11:48 p.m. on Friday, and I don't know, I didn't feel like making a big deal out of it and engaging too late at night. I was a little bit tired. Some of you have seen me up past that time, but it's Friday. I wanted to get to sleep, but I wanted to answer Dan. And, but then, I did see how popular this thread was, and I was a little bit reluctant to say, off the cuff, I'll tell you, no, it's not true. But for Dan, I was willing to say so. I just wanted to get that message out to somebody who was interested in finding out. And I told him by morning there was much more interest in whether or not it was true, and many more people were circulating the thread, and a lot of people who I think got it right had already kind of come to the rescue and trying to explain this thing. But I guess you can never have too much by way of explainer. So maybe you saw this or some version of it along the way. The tweet from Steve Simitzis goes this way. Amazing. He says, also clear now that McCain's yes on the motion to proceed is what killed the bill. And then pointing to this Reddit thread. We're talking, of course, about zombie treason care and the late night / early morning drama Thursday into Friday that, like we said, we've been calling it zombie treason care for a long time. We say killed the bill. It killed the momentum for the bill, that's for certain. But it didn't kill the bill despite this optimistic and very inventive thread. And it doesn't have the whole thread here. I guess it's got a link to it, and I suppose we should open that up and see what more there might be to discover from that. But I have a screen grab here that gets to the heart of it. And I'll go over to the Reddit thread and see if this is more expansive and more helpful. Under the heading of a U.S. Senate healthcare repeal bill fails, I've got this entry here. And I don't know anything about Reddit, so I can't even figure out where's the name of the person who wrote the thing. Anyway, the point being made here is this. I'm not sure if this is really being appreciated, just how comprehensively the Republicans were just, effed over. That's what it says. Oh, in fact, the screen grab has got all of this. So terrific, and including the dirty, dirty language. Anyway, see, the Republicans have been trying to pass this god-awful healthcare bill, or these god-awful healthcare bills, through a process called budget reconciliation. You know that. Which, among other things, protects the bill from being filibustered in the Senate and only requires a simple majority of 50 votes rather than 60, which the Republicans don't have. We're already gumming up the works here, of course. As you well know, all bills require just a simple majority in order to pass. The only impediment to getting to that is invoking cloture on the debate on the bill, and that requires 60 votes. And so, yes, effectively, when people say everything requires 60 votes in the Senate, now, of course, only about half of what the Senate does requires 60 votes. But the votes are always required to end debate. It only requires a bare majority to pass the bill, though. So, anyway, it's worth reminding everybody of that every once in a while so that you can help untangle some of the myths that grow up around reconciliation and the filibuster and all sorts of Senate procedure. It just helps to keep your thinking straight. Probably with any discipline, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, the screen grab and post continues. The thing is, the Senate can only consider one budget reconciliation bill per topic per year. I think I'm in the minority and disagreeing with this, but I think one day we'll all find out that I was right about this. One of the more persistent, I think, myths about reconciliation, don't bet your farm on this if you've got a farm. And if you do have a farm, can you hook me up with farmersonly.com? I keep mocking the thing, but it looks terrific. What nice people, the way they get so frustrated when other people don't like to fish. It's really wonderful. Can't wait to get involved in that. Okay, anyway, don't bet the farm on it, but I think one of these myths has grown up around reconciliation, which is that they can only consider one reconciliation bill per year. And this goes a little bit further. It says one reconciliation bill per topic per year. And I'm not even sure exactly what they mean, but at one point on the show we went over the various kinds of instructions reconciliation bills or budget bills can issue for reconciliation, and the kinds of subjects you can and cannot consider under reconciliation. One of which is, areas of you can touch on areas of policy, but the whole point of it is to achieve budgetary savings is the point. But I also, for instance, pointed out that it's permissible to raise the debt ceiling using reconciliation, which would be considered a separate category. But this idea that you can only use reconciliation once per year, I don't know exactly where it came from, and I wish I could find it out and examine it and stomp it out if necessary. There have been years in which the Congress has considered more than one reconciliation bill, and I think that's what they're getting at with the hedge, one reconciliation bill per topic per year. But I think it's come to be understood, and incorrectly understood at that there is only one attempt at passing a reconciliation bill per year, and that's by tradition been true. Although, as I said, they have passed reconciliation bills, two or more reconciliation bills in the past once or twice. But I think practice has been mistaken for the rule largely, and I'm not as intimately familiar with reconciliation rules as some other portions of the Senate rules, but my surface understanding of it is that there's really nothing in those rules that prohibits considering more than one reconciliation bill in a year, even on the same topic, really, depending on how the instructions are written. That's difficult. And it's getting even more and more difficult every day to understand exactly what will and won't be permissible based on the instructions, because they're stretching the instructions and the interpretation of them beyond all reasonable boundaries too. So that makes it tough. But I think that we've mistaken the practice for the rule here. And I think it's been written up that way, and I think it's never really been disproven since whoever made this, I think, mistake of committing to writing somewhere that you can only consider one reconciliation bill per year. It has since not been shown to be wrong even once by bringing more than one reconciliation bill in a single year, even when it's possible. And I think that has been mistaken for that mistaken pronouncement to be correct. This is just one of the weird things that happens in these dark corners, I guess, of interpreting the rules. Anyway, I don't think it's the case, but this person does think it's the case, that the Senate can only consider one budget reconciliation bill per topic per year. He goes on to write, of course, if the bill dies in committee and never comes to an official vote, it doesn't count, which is why they've been able to keep hammering away at the issue. I think that's true, but I don't think it explains very much. This bill, though, this piece continues, was allowed to come to the Senate floor because the Republicans thought they'd secured the votes. Collins, Murkowski, and the Democrats would vote no, and everyone else would vote yes, and Pence would break the tie. I'm sure that's what they thought. And then McCain completely, F-word, completely F'd them. Why does he think so? A lot of people do think so because, of course, his vote of a no on what they ended up calling the skinny repeal bill ended up dooming the prospects, or at least the current prospects, of the zombie Trump care, treason care bill at large. But I don't think it did what they think it did. He says McCain completely F'd them, and it was almost certainly a calculated move. This writer goes on to say, he voted to allow the bill to come to the floor. And had McCain allowed it to die in committee, where it never was, remember that this thing never went to committee, but he means had McCain allowed it to die at this stage, had he voted against the motion to proceed such that the bill never came to the floor, then McConnell could have come back with yet another repeal bill. And that makes some sense. If he had decided not to allow this bill to proceed, McConnell could have come back, he could have come back, as this person writes, with another repeal bill. But of course, he could have come back with the same repeal bill also. He could simply have moved to reconsider the motion to proceed, or have made an identical motion to proceed the next day. There's nothing about defeating a motion to proceed that kills the underlying bill. You haven't even begun to consider the underlying bill. Think about it logically. Think about it carefully. And the logic makes a certain amount of sense. I know people's heads begin to spin when it comes to procedure. But if the question before the Senate is, should we proceed to the debate of H.R. 123, and the answer is no, fine. But why would that kill H.R. 123? All it means is, yeah, at this time I do not want to talk about H.R. 123. Ask me tomorrow, the answer might be different. Now, the political atmosphere may have changed, and it may very well be the case that they don't try to return to H.R. 123, and very often that's simply a function of the value of Senate floor time, which, by the way, is out the window at this point, because there's nothing they have that's worth spending any Senate floor time on now. They just don't have anything. But nonetheless, people come to think of Senate floor time as extraordinarily valuable. If you get to a motion to proceed on something and you lose the motion to proceed, you'd have to, as majority leader, evaluate at that point, is there anything that makes me think that taking this vote again at a later time will get me a different result? You know, the old adage about insanity being doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It's not insanity if you really think that there will be different results because you're not doing exactly the same thing. I guess you could do the same thing, but, that would be insane, wouldn't it? But think about what might be on McConnell's mind. If you're McConnell and you hear from an opponent of the motion to proceed, make it as simple as possible. I just didn't want to do it today. Not really sure why anybody would say that, but ask me again tomorrow, I might change my vote. Well, if you believe that that's the case, you might ask again the next day. If you don't believe it's the case, you give up. But it doesn't kill the bill. It just means that you aren't going to bring it to the floor again, because ordinarily, under normal circumstances, and remember, we can all say it together, this is not normal. Under normal circumstances, you would say, there's so much more I have to get to. For instance, I have so many bills in pocket that I keep promising to bring up, and I don't. At this point, you would move on to them, unless you have reason to believe that you can change someone's mind, or some other external factor will change someone's mind, such that when you bring the motion to proceed a second time, you will win. And if you win, it is not an invalid question to ask twice whether everybody wants to talk about H.R. 123. There's no reason why you can't. Now, if the answer is yes, and you bring the bill to the floor and you have a vote on final passage of H.R. 123 and you lose, there's a limited number of things you can do, but even then, really, you shouldn't count things out automatically. Again, normally, the practice is to say, look, we lost, let's move on. I have a ton of other bills that really need to be considered. How much time can I spend trying to coax one or two votes across the line for this thing? Unless I have a reason to believe minds will change, I'm not going to do it. So the usual practice is to leave the bill behind and to say it's dead. But it's not dead. It's just in suspended animation. I have no intention of unfreezing it at any point, but it isn't dead. I just don't care. I don't want to bother. I don't want to spend any time on it. That's what's usually happening with these things. And that's what's usually happening with anything that's in danger of a motion to proceed. Anyway, back to this claim here. The bill was allowed to come to the Senate floor because Republicans thought they'd secured the votes. Collins, Murkowski, and the Dems would vote no. Everyone else would vote yes. Pence would break the tie. That's when McCain F's them, according to this calculation. And it was almost as certainly a calculated move, this person says, voting the bill, to allow the bill to come to the floor. Had McCain allowed it to die in committee, where it never was, McConnell would have had to come back with yet another repeal bill. But as I've just explained to you, he could absolutely come back with the same repeal bill. But it goes on. He let it come to a vote, and now they can't consider another budget reconciliation bill for the rest of the fiscal year. The Senate needs 60 votes to pass any kind of health care reform now. So now they're caught between a rock and a hard place. Either they concede defeat on the issue and try again later, causing a big unpopular stink that could damage elections if they try it again before midterms, or risking losing the slim majority they already have if they wait, or they actually sit down with the Democrats like adults and write a halfway decent health care bill. This is amazing. It is amazing, and you can see why it caught fire. It's mind-numbing enough to sound like it might actually be true. And I've ruined the surprise, but it isn't. Dan Lawson asked me whether it was, and I took a quick look at it, and unfortunately the answer is no. It's really not. And it's saddening, but basically you've probably already got an inkling as to why. One, I am not a big believer in the idea that you really only get one reconciliation bill per year, but we don't even need to get to that, because there's a more direct reason why it doesn't mean that they can't come back with another reconciliation bill. Again, as I told you, the motion to proceed in this case was, of course, to a motion to proceed to the consideration of the House bill, which I forget offhand is something like H.R. 1628. I believe that's actually the number. And it doesn't matter whether it is or not. But recall what happened on Thursday night / Friday morning was that they brought up consideration of H.R. 1628 and then sought to amend it several times, ending up with Mitch McConnell. I think it was him that brought it up. I'm not even certain whether he did it or whether he had Enzi handle the thing. But what became known as skinny repeal, whether you think that's a good name for it or not, got brought up, and it was offered as a complete substitute, I think, for the entirety of the text of H.R. 1628. They're just going to swap out everything that was in there for this new skinny repeal bill. And it was this bill, this amendment, really, and it's important to be clear about that, this amendment to H.R. 1628 that was finally defeated. All the amendments that were offered to 1628 eventually were defeated. But this was the last one they had in their pocket at the time, skinny repeal. So when McCain votes no, this is not a no vote. This is not what was the total ended up, I guess, being 49 to 51. Did everybody vote? I guess so. Anyway, it wasn't that a majority of the Senate had voted no on final passage of H.R. 1628. They didn't have a vote on final passage of H.R. 1628. They stopped after McConnell switched over and voted no on amending H.R. 1628 to reflect the language of the so-called skinny repeal amendment. The skinny repeal amendment was defeated. All the other amendments too, and that's where it stopped. And so, to use the terminology that this person on Reddit used, what ended up happening here is, even if you were a believer of the one reconciliation bill per year theory, you could not, in all truth, say that the Republicans have had their one chance. All right, it's not even a Republican thing at the Senate. The Senate had taken its one chance at a reconciliation bill this year. It's still pending. They decided not to amend it with any of the amendments that were offered, but that's all. What happened at that point is the bill basically goes into suspended animation, like I mentioned before. And as a matter of fact, one of the next things that the housekeeping items that happened on the Senate floor after the big shocking moment was that Mitch McConnell moved, and I believe by asking unanimous consent, by the way, to move H.R. 1628 back to the Senate calendar. That's where they park bills that are eligible for floor action. The first time, second time, third time. Usually you don't get a second crack at it because, again, normally, and this is not normal, normally Senate time is at such a premium that if you can't go prime time in your first attempt, it's just not worth bringing you back. That's just not something we're going to spend Senate floor time on, trying to revive this thing. But this is all they've got. They may very well try to bring this thing back. And it's important to realize that, yeah, there was no final vote on this bill, just a bunch of votes on a bunch of amendments, some of which were complete substitutes for the bill, but all of them were amendments. So McCain, being really clever, allowing the bill to come to the floor because he voted for the motion to proceed, only to pull out the secret weapon and kill the big last-ditch effort amendment that Mitch McConnell had up his sleeve, is not the same thing as defeating the bill. And I might as well point out that, by the way, had they defeated the bill instead, Mitch McConnell, you would have seen him switch his vote to no, so that he was voting with the majority in this case, not the partisan majority as in the Republicans, but with the taking the side in the vote that a majority of the Senate had taken, which would entitle him to one motion to reconsider that same question. In other words, if they had voted to defeat H.R. 1628 outright, he could have voted along with them and then later moved to reconsider the vote on H.R. 1628 if he thought he could get another outcome. I mean, he could make the motion regardless, but he'll only make it if he thought he could get a better outcome this time. And no reason to believe that he would be able to get a different outcome on the same bill at this point. But who knows what happens in the future. Let's say John McCain needs to retire to pay attention to his battle with cancer, and a new Republican senator is dispatched from Arizona who is a yes vote. You might very well then get a different outcome, and you might want to test that. Now, that's not likely to be exactly what happens, but it's a possibility. So anyway, like I said, even if you believe in theory that you only get one reconciliation bill per year or one bill per year per topic, and I just can't back that up. And one day we'll find out. The whole world will go on believing this based on practice and nothing else. And then one day hopefully it's Democrats that pleasantly surprise us this way, but who knows? But one day somebody will surprise us by bringing a second reconciliation bill, and everyone will say, I thought you could only bring one bill per year. And I'll say, no, I told you you could do more than that. This stupid myth about only being able to bring one per year doesn't make any damn sense, and it was never based on anything. And even so, even if you believed it, I mean, I don't know why anybody believes it. I guess it just has that feeling to it, like you don't have to deal with a filibuster. I bet that was in the rules. It's like a fairy tale rule, right? Like once a year on a magical date, you can do anything you want or turn into if you don't pass it by midnight, everybody turns into pumpkins. It doesn't work like that in the Senate. Anyway, the real issue here is, no, this isn't right. If you heard from someone that this was correct, it isn't. And it doesn't have anything to do with reconciliation either. I've also seen a number of explanations that sort of fall in between the once per year and so therefore it's over version, which isn't even right because you didn't get a vote on final passage on this bill. And I've also seen it, it has something to do with reconciliation and he could put it back on the calendar because of that, because he didn't get that one vote. It's the same with any bill. Reconciliation or not, if you bring H.R. 123 or S. 123 for a Senate bill to the floor and you try to amend it 15 times and all of your favorite amendments fail, you still haven't killed the underlying bill or even decided what you're going to do with it. That doesn't make any difference, whether it's reconciliation bill or not. All you did was beat a bunch of amendments. Everybody knew that the whole ball of wax rode on the outcome of this amendment, but that doesn't make it the bill either. That just makes a lot of people confused, and a lot of people took their eye off the ball and forgot what we were really voting on here. Procedure. It means something. It counts. Pay attention. So, what happened? Mitch McConnell parked this thing back on the Senate calendar. He did it by unanimous consent. Yes, a member of the Senate from the Democratic Party could have objected to doing that. I would have, but I would have been defeated because obviously at that point, unless John McCain was really livid, and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski too, you would probably get 52 votes. You'd get your Republicans back together to say, to put this thing back on the calendar so we can make another attempt later? Sure, I'm for that. Even John McCain would probably be okay with that. I mean, if that lost, I think at that point McConnell would have been voted out as majority leader probably the next morning. But it didn't lose. Although, again, I would have made the objection just to see them take that vote and to say, I'm going to make you guys stay up forever, and including you, John McCain. I'm sorry that we were so angry with you because we thought you would fold. You didn't fold, but I wouldn't. I'm not ready to give you your superhero cape just yet. Right? So I would have objected just to make people vote it out and say, I told you I was going to make your life hell. What makes you think I will let you off the hook here because it's 2 a.m? Anyway, so he got his unanimous consent. He put it back on the calendar. That should be, that's the strongest possible signal. One, that all this nonsense about magical thinking about reconciliation isn't true. And two, that they very well might come back because it's not zombie treason care for nothing. And in fact, by Saturday afternoon, there were already indications exactly how they were going to try and do it. So how about I share that with you? Politico had the story that I was first able to pick up on. Burgess Everett, whose name gets called a lot on this stuff, Josh Dawsey, and Rachel Bade have this Saturday afternoon dispatch as Trump steams, and boy did he steam, but he was doing a lot of rage tweeting on Saturday morning. He's such a doofus. Maybe we'll get to that. Anyway, as Trump steams, Senate Republicans consider new repeal effort. What? They're going to try for a 70-something try? How could we possibly be surprised? All repeal efforts are zombie repeal efforts. Didn't they have 60-something of them during the Obama administration? What makes you think they're going to stop? Subheader on this one says, some congressional Republicans are backing a proposal by Senator Lindsey Graham that they hope can get 50 Republican votes. What does that mean? That means they intend to come back under reconciliation rules. Why? Because you don't get just one shot at it per year. And even if you thought that was the case, they didn't get the final vote on this thing. It's still a live bill. Look, you can tell it's a live bill. It's on the Senate calendar. Things that are dead aren't on the Senate calendar. That's not really true either. But they could have just let it die. They could have tabled it. That could have done anything with it. They could have referred it to committee for the first time. But instead they put it back on the calendar. And again, being on the calendar doesn't mean you have a shot at the floor all the time either. They put all kinds of bills that they have no intention of bringing to the floor on the calendar. It's just someplace they put bills. But here's what's going on. Senate Republicans' party line attempts to repeal Obamacare aren't dead just yet. I told you. At least not if President Donald Trump has anything to say with it. Oh, okay. Well, then in that case, they might be dead because he doesn't know what he's doing. Trump, increasingly impatient with the long-stalled repeal effort, met with 3 Senate Republicans about a new plan to roll back the health care law on Friday, signaling some lawmakers, as well as the president, are not ready to ditch their 7-year campaign promise. And it stands to reason, I guess, at some level. The group is trying to write legislation that could get 50 Republican votes, according to multiple administration and Capitol Hill sources. The proposal from Senator Lindsey Graham, of course, of South Carolina, would block grant federal health care funding to the states and keep much of Obamacare's tax regime. White House officials also met with House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows, he's from North Carolina, to brainstorm how to make the idea palatable to conservatives, according to 2 sources familiar with the meeting. And again, anybody who thought that the Freedom Caucus would put the kibosh on just accepting skinny repeal and passing it and calling it a victory has some explaining to do. I mean, after all, Lindsey Graham's proposal here ought to be considered outrageous for House Freedom Caucus people to back. All it really does is convert the grants and the monies that the federal government hands over to the states to help subsidize the policies bought on the exchanges, etc., and other things, into block grants, and so that there's we always hate it whenever Republicans want to convert things into block grants, and Republicans love it because it makes for one consolidated target to either kill multiple programs or one easy target to cut and say you've cut millions of dollars for programs across the board, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that Democrats used in years past anyway to try and embed and protect their favored programs is to split them up into discrete programs and program funds, so that if you want to save money by making cuts to the budget and you want to cut things across the board, we get to name all the various very important programs on which people have come to rely that you plan on gutting or killing, and you can rally those constituencies against the cuts. But rallying a constituency against a block grant is considerably more difficult because it's just that much more abstract. Yeah, I mean, you're still hurting the same people and the same number of them. It's just somehow, for whatever reason, it's more difficult to say, well, it's not that they're targeting your program, it's they're targeting the block grant fund that funds your program. And although people ought to be able to put two and two together, here I am explaining things that they don't. Okay, it's 2 and 2. Did they vote to kill the bill? No. But I'm going to write a Reddit thread that says they did. Well, okay, but I guess I should have expected that because people aren't putting 2 and 2 together. It's more complicated than 2 and 2. I understand, but that's what we're here for. So, block granting, a Republican, long-standing Republican trick, and anytime they say they want to do that, you can be pretty sure that eventually that is going to cause problems for Democrats and believers in social spending, and you should oppose it. There's no reason why the House Freedom Caucus should be happy about that. Although it's a good Republican tool for cutting spending later in the future, one, they'll want to see those cuts being made now, and two, the rest of Graham's plan is to leave most Obamacare taxes in place. And that will drive a House Freedom Caucus person to distraction. But they were already thinking about accepting it because they want to win as much as Trump does. And they also, I think, are eager, some of them, to test drive the Trump method, which is to just say, pass anything and declare it victory. And if people see that it's quite plainly, in fact, defeat, but you just keep saying it's victory, magically, for some reason, Trump supporters eventually tell whenever Chris Arnade finally comes around and drinks a Pabst Blue Ribbon at their bar, they say there was this great victory, and he writes it down and it becomes a victory. And in their minds it is. And they'll return the same members of Congress to give us headaches, so what's the difference? Effectively, it's a victory. So, I don't know. It's a confusing situation. This is where I can't even put 2 and 2 together. Or it's a different kind of 2 and 2. Because there's a lot of people out there putting this 2 and 2 together all the time. The White House healthcare huddle came just 2 hours before Trump savaged Senate Republicans in a series of Saturday tweets for failing to repeal Obamacare. If the Senate doesn't pass a bill soon, Trump warned, it doesn't matter what bill, any bill. If the Senate doesn't pass a bill soon, he may halt Obamacare payments subsidizing health plans for low-income individuals, an idea adamantly opposed by Republicans and Democrats alike. And we have been through this scenario. This would just be Trump sabotaging Obamacare to try to make it fail so that he could say, see, I told you it was going to fail. And it reminds me a lot of having debates with gun enthusiasts who say, you'll be sorry that you advocated for not keeping a loaded weapon under your pillow, cocked and locked and ready to fire on a split second's notice. I know you think that you're being safe that way, but I'll show you how unsafe you're being by breaking into your house myself and shooting and killing you. And that last moment before you die, you'll realize that you should have had that gun that you said was so safe now that it was locked up and away from your toddlers. Fat lot of good it did you. And you have to actually explain to those guys, well, I'm taking a calculated risk that no one will break into my house with the intent to kill me at random, though it could always happen. But more likely somebody who's going to break into my house is probably on their way to rob me, yes. And the odds are probably about even when you get to the question of who's going to win the gun battle that later ensues, even if my gun is locked up. I have a biometric lock. All I have to do is put my fingerprint on it. It pops open, and there's the gun. And I'm ready to go, and now we have our shootout. But you are going to break in. You're going to target my house and break in silently with a silencer and shoot me through the window or something to prove that I needed a gun under my pillow instead. And that's not really a good real world test of who needs a gun and whether or not it's worth having it in real life. It's you against the random perversity of the world, not me against a targeted assassination attempt. Anyway, same thing here. Donald Trump thinks that if I ruin Obamacare by intentionally screwing it up and making sure that people get hurt, then I told you people were going to get hurt. No, you're not allowed to target things like that. But it's Donald Trump, so everybody forgets that he's not allowed to do that. All his fans do anyway. And Chris Arnade, I guess, after drinking all those Pabst Blue Ribbons in everybody's bars. At some point he's going to lose track. It's just inevitable. Anyway, that's really not what we came here for. We came here to find out that Trump all the other things that were going on. Trump also appeared to take a personal shot at lawmakers, seemingly warning that he could revoke their own health benefits on the exchanges, which I am not 100% certain he could actually do, but that makes no difference to him. If a new health care bill is not approved quickly, he says, bailouts, in all caps, bailouts for insurance companies and bailouts for members of Congress will end very soon. Trump tweeted Saturday afternoon. I don't think he actually has the mechanism to get that done for members of Congress. In addition to which it would be arguably unconstitutional by changing their compensation package in the middle of a session without an intervening election. But never mind all of that. He doesn't care about that. And also, this is just one of a long and growing list of things that will be so easy. It's going to be so easy. You're going to get such a beautiful solution out of this. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be great. Just like everything else. He's full of it. It's just hot air. He just says, I'm going to do this thing, and he has no idea how to do it, whether it can be done, whether it's constitutional. None of that matters to him. None of it matters to the people in the bars with Chris Arnade. We know that. Moving on with this article, Trump seemed optimistic about moving forward on a bill on Friday after the shocking setback this week appeared to cripple his legislative agenda as a whole, really, according to a White House official. So he seemed optimistic. He was really optimistic about getting out of there for the weekend, getting another scoop of ice cream, whatever. Several Republican Senate aides, senior ones at that, and allies of GOP leaders cautioned against any feelings of momentum coming from the White House on Saturday, particularly after Trump again instructed Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to change the Senate rules to a simple majority and gut the legislative filibuster. We're going to do this. I'm going to get this done. All we have to do is change Senate rules, but of course that's not up to him. And it's up to the senators themselves. Mitch McConnell, of course, is going to figure pretty prominently in all of this. And wishing it was so from the White House isn't the same thing as getting it done. You can't order that stuff done. Although, again, in normal circumstances, and this is not normal, having the president weigh in on something like that is meaningful. He just has to have some leadership qualities, and this one doesn't. So why not? Why don't you want to be optimistic if you're a Republican and you think, oh, this is great. It is a zombie after all. It's coming back. We're going to get another chance. The reason for some doubt about this is right down here at the bottom of the article. McConnell has resisted such a suggestion publicly and has been pushing back against Trump privately, according to people familiar with their interactions. This has happened before, and usually, actually, McConnell ends up losing out in these things. One person close to McConnell said Trump has asked McConnell personally to change the rules, but said no. I guess McConnell is the one that said no. I either lost the track of that sentence or it's poorly written. Anyway, Trump says change the rules. McConnell says, no, I'm not going to do that. During his Saturday tweet storm, Trump blamed the arcane budget reconciliation rules that make it more difficult to fully repeal and replace Obamacare on party lines. Oh, and I did see a lot of ridicule for Trump in this. And don't tell anybody I said this, except I'm recording it. But there's actually a sense in which Trump was right in all of this, even though it made it look like, because we're so used to his being dumb, we thought he was being dumb again. And I don't think he's being smart. I think he's stumbled into possible correctness in this. He wrote, of course, the very outdated filibuster rule must go. And you might be right about that. But he says budget reconciliation is killing ours, meaning Republicans, in the Senate. Mitch M. I love the way he does this. Mitch M. Like, he's like a fourth grader. Which Mitch do you mean? Mitch M? Yeah. All right. Well, budget reconciliation is killing ours in the Senate. Mitch M. Go to 51 votes now and win. It's time, Trump said. Republicans in the Senate will never win if they don't go to a 51 vote majority now. They look like fools and are just wasting time. I agree with all of that. Including the part about them looking like fools and wasting time. And, yeah, they are not going to win unless they go to a 51 vote majority now. But people were giving him a hard time because he said, yeah, as lots of people put it, hey, you only needed 51 votes to win this one and you couldn't get it. Do you not even remember that you moved this bill under reconciliation and you thought you had 50 votes and you didn't? You lost by one? Everybody was watching that yesterday, even late at night, even to the early morning hours. We all saw what happened. Changing the rules to pass a bill with just 51 votes wouldn't have helped you. You could have passed this bill with 51 votes and you couldn't muster the votes. That's true, of course, but remember that the rules of reconciliation made it almost impossible for them to design a bill that would do the sorts of things they really wanted to do and get majority support for it. Remember that they couldn't, there's so much that they couldn't do. The bird rule. Remember how much the bird bath stripped out? A lot of that stuff was essential to getting the support of various Republican senators. And I think under regular order, if they could proceed to a vote and close debate and pass the bill all with a simple majority, they probably could put together a bill if they didn't have to work under the strictures of the bird rule that could satisfy 50, if not all 52 Republican senators and get something passed. So that's a pretty serious danger. But I don't think that he had any inkling that he knew what he was talking about there. I just think that that's something, he's tweeted that a lot. But I didn't want to get in anybody's way making fun of Donald Trump for being dumb, because I think it sometimes gets under his skin, and I'd prefer that he think he's dumb. I'm okay with that. I will lose out on educating one person in all this. As long as that one person is Donald Trump, I'll still be okay with that. Anyway, the article then goes on to say Senate rules don't appear to be the problem. From the skinny repeal bill to a McConnell-designed replacement bill to a so-called clean repeal bill, all GOP efforts failed to get 50 votes in the Senate this week. After the GOP's failure to move forward on Friday, McConnell asked the Senate Democrats for their ideas on health care and warned against bailing out insurance companies. I don't even know what they think that means, but okay. Some Republican senators want to move on from the partisan effort and start looking at fixes to the law's insurance exchanges with Senate Democrats. McConnell has vowed not to change Senate rules all year and has publicly encouraged Trump to cool it on the tweeting several times. His office reiterated his previous comments. In theory, the Senate could bring back their party line reconciliation effort to gut Obamacare as soon as next week. That's absolutely true. As I explained earlier today, this thing is back on the calendar. Graham's bill has not been scored by the Congressional Budget Office and did not receive a test vote this week. It currently has a small group of supporters and will likely need major work to pass the Senate, like language defunding Planned Parenthood, which would likely alienate a pair of moderate senators and, of course, would probably run into birdbath rules all over again. That they don't mention. Senators Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and Dean Heller of Nevada joined Graham at the White House on Friday. Those are the other two of the three, I guess. Thanks for bringing that up. And each has joined Graham's bill as the new alternative plan for Republicans. The bill's supporters are telling administration officials and congressional aides that the bill will score far better than previous efforts, which CBO analyses project would cause millions more uninsured people and short-term spikes in premiums. I had a great meeting with the president, and no, he remains fully committed to repealing and replacing Obamacare. President Trump was optimistic about the Graham-Cassidy-Heller proposal. I will continue to work with President Trump and his team to move the idea forward, Graham said late Friday. The South Carolina senator had been talking to Meadows about the bill as a possible way forward that both chambers could accept. Several GOP governors have signaled interest to Graham for the bill as a way to keep funding levels steady and give states more control. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price is also monitoring those conversations, a Republican aide said. Meadows has shopped the Graham proposal around to other conservatives to get their take on the bill. He said Thursday that Graham's bill would need to ease the ability of governors to get waivers to ignore some of Obamacare's regulations. We're going to regroup and stay focused, Meadows said Friday. I'm still optimistic that we have another motion to proceed and ultimately put something on the president's desk. But the GOP would have to take another painful procedural vote to open debate. And Senator John McCain is expected to remain in Arizona for cancer treatment until the end of the August recess. McCain voted to open debate on the Obamacare repeal effort, but voted against, of course, the GOP's skinny bill that would gut the law's individual mandate. He called for McConnell to hit the reset button on Friday, although his political capital may have taken a hit for squashing Republicans' 7-year political vow to gut Obamacare with his surprising vote. The vote last night presents the Senate with an opportunity to start fresh. This would be his famous, awesome statesman-like speech. It is now time to return to regular order with input from all our members, Republicans and Democrats, he said on Friday. Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska would have to reverse course on opening debate on the bill for things to move forward in August without McCain. Republican senators are angry at Trump for calling Murkowski this week to rethink her opposition to the GOP's effort, several Republican sources said. The moderate Alaska senator told E&E News that the conversation on Tuesday with Trump was not a very pleasant call. Several Republicans said privately Trump's heavy hand, and I don't know, I mean, they really have to be dense to be able to get heavy at that size, don't you think? Derailed any chance of getting Murkowski to support the skinny bill, which was meant as a way to send the GOP's repeal efforts into conference with the House, maybe. Vice President, for the time being, Mike Pence, spent most of Friday's vote whipping McCain. You know that means he wasn't actually flailing McCain. It was, you know what that means. But a number of Republican senators tried to flip Murkowski as well, and she was unmoved and voted no. So that would be really interesting. That's another interesting dynamic. If they managed to engineer a way back for the bill, but didn't have McCain's vote to rely on for a 51st vote for a motion to proceed, or a 50th vote for a motion to proceed, and Murkowski was still pissed at Trump because he played his tiny hand so hard, thinking that was the last effort, the last ditch effort, nothing, it was all or nothing at that point. You might as well weigh in heavy with her. And here you are finding out, no, there's actually another way we can get back relatively quickly to this same subject without having lost very much ground, only to find out, oh my God, I poisoned the well with Murkowski, and now I can't even get 49 votes. That would be pretty funny. I'd find that pretty ironic and really rather pretty entertaining. In the end, that'd be a great way to finish. Now, I don't know whether that really happens, and Murkowski could very well say, if you want to talk about a reasonable approach to reform, I'm open to that. But I don't know if they're going to get everybody back together and on the same page, voting for a motion to proceed on a bill that they haven't seen again. There's going to have to be some regular order in this, and they're going to have to hash out exactly what this means. I don't know that they can get the band back together for a vote on something that is completely secret and unknown, and you got to vote for it just to get us to conference, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if they'll be able to pull that trick again. That one that might have been spent on that one. Anyway, just wanted to kind of keep you up to date. Who knows, by Monday, maybe this is old hat, but I'm guessing that most of you weren't following all that closely over the weekend because you were trying to enjoy yourselves instead. And I know that's tough to do, and you want to take every opportunity you can to get a little enjoyment out of life on a weekend, even if it means you have to sit down and record a show for Monday on a pleasant Saturday afternoon, for instance. These things happen. All right, so sticking with the subject of the Senate, at least for the moment, before we switch gears and get into something a little bit different. Let's see, what do we got here? As I'm recording this, actually, I wanted to add this. I see Robert Costa on Twitter, and I don't think he's yet got a follow-up article on this, but he is noting in response to one of Trump's rage tweets from today about the filibuster and the need to get rid of the filibuster, he writes, a McConnell ally pings me and says the majority leader can't stand, and he encloses in a little asterisks. He can't stand this kind of process advice from down the street. So, like I said, it'll be, it's a tall order to think that Trump can push McConnell into wanting to actually bring this thing back to the floor. And that's really, I think, the key to the likelihood of seeing some new form of an approach to healthcare under reconciliation coming back to the floor. He's got to want to do this. He's got to want to think it's going to work and want to spend his time on it. But it's probably even more the case that, I had said for a long time, in the filibuster reform battles, that the minute the Republicans feel the need to change the rules, they likely would. And that hasn't happened yet. And a lot of people probably wondering in the back of their minds, why haven't they just changed the rules? Why go through this struggle over healthcare under the reconciliation rules when they could just change the rules? That's always hanging out there. And to do that just has to be something McConnell wants to do. It's the minute the people in the Senate are frustrated and want to see this thing pass. And I don't really know that McConnell has cared that much. He's happy to deliver a victory and look like a genius if he can do it. But I don't think the health care bill, even the 7-year goal of repeal, has really been central to McConnell's agenda. And I do think that the filibuster rule could be in danger the moment a personal goal of McConnell's is stymied by a filibuster that he thinks is unfair. I think things could change that way. And I think that's really what it takes. And I think that gets less and less likely. There's less and less that McConnell is interested in doing the more he gets guff for what's going on from the guy in the White House who has no idea what's going on. But there are, I guess, possible other small bore rules changes which are possible, which we ought to discuss. The Hill has a story also from Saturday. I don't know. I'm not certain how much stock to put in it. The main player in the story is Senator Ron Johnson, and he's not in good standing at the moment with Mitch McConnell, certainly, although he did show up and provide his vote as necessary during the Thursday evening, Friday morning zombie treason care voting. But they're known to be, there's a lot of tension in their relationship. And there was lots of explanation of the political background of it. And I think it came down, or it's rooted in McConnell not spending any money in Johnson's reelection campaign, but I guess writing him off, thinking he was going to lose. And he's angry about that. And since then, they really haven't gotten along. And, of course, the most recent episode, things that Greg has reminded you of, the two of them were at odds because Johnson called McConnell out for having lied or for having misled him and other, or really all senators in the very the basic stuff about what was this bill going to be about, and he was very public in explaining to people that McConnell was simply telling people what they wanted to hear about what was in the bill. It could, for one group it's this, for one group it's that, and for both of you, don't worry about it. If you don't like that, we're going to change it all in conference, or we'll change it all with a substitute amendment during the consideration of the bill on the floor. And if you don't like that one, we'll change it in conference. So I don't know. I don't know if Johnson has his pulse on what's happening in the Senate. I don't know if the chances for the reform he suggests are doomed in McConnell's mind, by the fact that Johnson is the one that suggests this. So I'm not sure what to make of it. The reform by itself, by the way, it isn't a terrible one. It will cost us, I guess. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I would have felt differently about this one. I would have felt like it cost us a great deal more. Now I'm not quite as sure, but even so, this is a reform that I thought Democrats should have made when they were changing the filibuster rule with respect to nominations. And this, for the reason being, it's just kind of common sense. So it'll be difficult, to an extent, to oppose it now. Not that I couldn't find myself doing it just the same, although I guess I would lean more on the situation than the current situation with a nut in the White House than on my feeling about the way the nominations process perhaps ought to work during a normal presidency. And again, this is not normal. Here's let me get right to it and tell you what Johnson has up his sleeve here. The Hill's piece by Julia Manchester. GOP senator calls for new rules to more quickly confirm Trump nominees. So you can see I'm already on shaky ground here. I'm suggesting that it might make sense to reform the filibuster with respect to nominees that Donald Trump is naming to office. And that's already a problem, because that would be crazy. But let me tell you think about it just from a process perspective. And you may recognize the suggestion if you've been a longtime listener or following the filibuster reform efforts that we put on at Daily Kos and elsewhere for long enough. You might recognize it. Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican of Wisconsin, of course, just to remind everyone, called for a change in Senate rules to speed up the confirmation process for Donald Trump's executive nominations, claiming the slow pace of confirmations was the result of a breakdown in the Senate. It's not, but okay. Less than a month from the August recess, the Senate has confirmed only 22% of those nominated to serve in the Trump administration. By the same point in President Barack Obama's first term, the Senate had confirmed 53% of Obama's nominations. Johnson wrote in a Washington Post op-ed on Friday. We should probably take a look at that and critique it one day, but we'll take the Hill's summary for now. Pausing just for a second, of course, by this point in Barack Obama's presidency, he had nominated level-headed, normal people qualified for the job to almost every one of the positions named. And Donald Trump, one, has taken his own sweet time in even coming up with the names of nominees, and two, keeps nominating nut bars and is also a total nut bar himself, and it's really difficult to want to make those nominations move quickly. Besides which, for the longest time, and I still maintain this is the correct approach to take with a nut bar of a president, you slow every one of these down. Not only because, in all likelihood, anyone he's nominating at this point for a job is probably crazy and corrupt, but also because you want to keep whatever legislative agenda the Senate might even be able to come up with at this point off the floor for as long as possible. I don't really think they have an agenda. I don't know what they think they're going to get to, but I don't care. As long as the more time the Senate can be forced to sit and watch the clock, the better. I can't think of a better thing that we could force them to do at this point that I've got the constitutional power to force on them. Anyway, Johnson argued that Democrats are abusing rules that allow senators to use hours or days to debate a nominee and, quote, have required more than 30 Trump nominees to go through this burdensome and time-consuming process. It's called the filibuster, of course, and we went through it already. And the reason, by the way, that 53% of Obama's nominations had been approved by this point in his presidency was because nearly 50% of them had been blocked for no reason whatsoever by the Republicans at that time, who were, of course, dedicated to making Obama a one-term president, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a whole lot of hypocrisy, no doubt. But don't worry about it. I'll catch up to him a little bit on hypocrisy later on. The Wisconsin senator proposed limiting debate on sub-cabinet and lower-level nominees to 2 hours on the floor, while using Senate committees to vet nominees, which would be reported to the Senate. Leadership would then assign members to speak in favor of or against the nominee and then hold a vote. In other words, instead of 30 hours of post-cloture debate on a nomination, 2 hours of post-cloture debate. And that's not at all dissimilar to a suggestion made earlier when, for one thing, Democrats controlled the Senate, and 2, nominations were being made by a Democratic president. When we were reforming the filibuster with respect to nominations, the logic went like this. Post-cloture time is a remnant for in the nominations context is a remnant really of the weirdness of the filibuster rule for legislation. The idea being, all right, we'll allow you to put a cap on debate, but the cap on debate can't end debate and end discussion of what to do with a bill. It should result in, as it does under Rule 22, some extensive period of time, in this case it's 30 hours, post-cloture, during which time senators retain the ability to amend the bill. Now remember the original intent of the filibuster, or the technical term for a filibuster under the rules is extended debate. So at its heart, if you're really filibustering for the original purpose of the filibuster, it's to have continued extended debate on the subject. So obviously it makes sense to reserve the right to propose some additional amendments to it. If you've got a problem with the bill, maybe you can try to fix it through the amendment process. And that is not something that makes sense in the nominations context. There's no way to amend the nomination. You can't make it for less time than it's supposed to be for. You can't add a different person instead of this one. You can't graft the head of a goat, let's say, onto the shoulder of a judicial nominee, whatever you might, or even an executive branch nominee for that matter. The goat thing just doesn't fly anywhere. There's no way to amend the nomination. And so the use of the 30 hours of post-cloture time, you can continue to debate the merits of this nomination, if there are any merits to this nomination. And it reminds me, I have in pocket here a story to follow up on one of the more ridiculous nominations that Donald Trump has made to date. And the bad news is the follow-up is, like with most nominations, there's nothing you can do about it. After a certain amount of time, the guy basically gets in on a party line vote, and we have another nut bar in the federal service somewhere. So we'll get to who it is and which nut bar in particular we're so upset about. But it makes a certain amount of sense to eliminate post-cloture time or limit post-cloture time on nominations, since there aren't any amendments you can make. And how much more debate do you really need? At some point, you're going to have an hour to yell about how the person sucks and an hour to yell about how they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then you vote and it comes out exactly the way you thought it was going to, and it's over. So I can't say it's nonsensical to propose such a thing. It's not. It's sort of ridiculous and hypocritical at this point for Republican senators to pretend like, oh my God, the Democrats, they're abusing this process like no one I've ever seen before, with the exception of myself, who I see in the mirror every day. But other than that, I've never seen anybody that would abuse the process so egregiously. Of course, that's exactly what you were doing. And of course, right now, I mean, just from a strategic point of view, or tactical point of view, I guess, if I want to try to get it right, I don't want to, I want to burn those 30 hours. I want to make them run the clock. I want to annoy them. I want those nominations to take as long as possible and for there to be as few of them considered as possible. So now it comes down to whether or not Ron Johnson has any juice in the Senate and whether or not he can convince a supposedly reluctant, supposedly institutionalist Mitch McConnell to make a change like this. And for whose benefit? For Donald Trump's benefit. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is jabbing him in the back, with a dagger and telling him, change the rules, the one thing he doesn't want to do, and blaming the failure of the whole thing on him. And he's not going to be favorably inclined, not to mention the fact that there's now no agenda in which McConnell has any particular interest. So, let's get off of the nomination so we can move on to what? I mean, he may have some interest in tax reform, it's true. But he also can't be particularly happy given what a boring job the task of getting through this raft of nominations is, that he's gonna have to do some of these stupid jobs over again too. I mean, now that he's moved, he's fired Reince Priebus, which I guess we haven't made mention of on the show. That happened late on Friday, and moved retired General John Kelly from the Homeland Security Department over to Chief of Staff, which I guess means we've got an acting not HHS, but the Homeland Security Chief. But I don't think anybody knows who it is. And one of the things I saw noted on late Friday, there was no guidance whatsoever as to who's going to step in as acting secretary in the absence of a new nominee. And of course, a new nominee starts this whole stupid process all over again. Even Johnson is only proposing that this be done for sub-cabinet level nominations, and that I guess cabinet level you get to continue to waste 30 hours, which I guess undermines the whole sensibility of the thing. But then I guess the Supreme Court one didn't make any particular sense either. Why we why you supposedly were able to filibuster that. I don't know. I guess maybe because it was more contentious. Right? Maybe the analogy is better made to Armando's objection to why should there be a filibuster available on, or maybe there should be, what was it that you were saying? That we shouldn't have we should have the filibuster on judges, but not on executive nominations, because the judicial nominations are lifetime appointments. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot to work out on this, and it really should either be all or nothing, I guess. Although, there's a better, it should be all or nothing as between legislation and nominations, really. I know why they want to continue to keep the legislative filibuster, but it doesn't make any particular logical sense. Whereas I think I see some logical sense, at least, to what Armando was suggesting about leaving it in place with the judicial nominations. Anyway, it might just be fantasy at this point, and he continues the fantasy by describing things this way. He just says, Johnson says that Republicans can use former Senator Harry Reid's 51-vote precedent to change the rules. Of course, they could use that precedent. It's just that that's not the precedent. The precedent existed before Harry Reid did it, and everybody knows it. And sorry if no one believes it, but that's another one of those things that's going to get written down, and everybody's going to pretend that that's just true because no one ever corrects the record, and we never find ourselves in a situation that demands correcting it. But you and I will know. Anyway, he goes on to say the post-nuclear Senate is now a reality. It would make sense at least to try this precedent and make Washington somewhat less dysfunctional, Johnson said. Johnson's op-ed comes after the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee which is led by Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, delayed a vote on 6 Trump administration nominees after Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke allegedly told Murkowski her vote against the Obamacare repeal could steer the administration away from policies that could benefit Alaska. Interesting that there's that inclusion there at the end. I mean, none of Ron Johnson's proposed reforms helps when you can't get any of the nominees out of committee because the administration has insulted the chair of the relevant committee. Now, of course, there are many more nominations than just those that will go through the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. But what if there's another senator somewhere else who chairs the other relevant committees who's equally insulted by just the fact that they did this to Murkowski? I don't know. So it's not going to fix all their problems. And in addition to which, I mean, they're probably, I mean, if they're honest with themselves, and clearly the Republicans are not interested in that, they're going to find that there are times when they, too, wouldn't mind slowing down the process and all this. I mentioned to you that there was at least one nominee out there who would help illustrate this, and I'm going to have to scroll down to find this. But do you remember the judicial nominee whose name was floated, and we very briefly, I think, touched on the fact that this guy, as it turns out, had been for years writing a blog under a pseudonym, and that he was kind of a, well past right-wing kook. He was, we'll re-summarize some of what he was writing. And we worried, oh dear, now that we don't have the filibuster anymore, we are going to get kooks like this on the federal bench. And that was always a risk. Might as well face up to it. Well, that one's over and done with. He got the job. This datelined July 20th. I've been holding on to it for a while. Zoe Tillman, writing in BuzzFeed News, the Senate just confirmed, you see it was a couple of weeks ago now, Trump's controversial blogging nominee to a federal appeals court. It's not just a district court, it's an appeals court. The Senate on Thursday, well, this was way back when, confirmed Kentucky lawyer, so you know that McConnell was, I guess, pleased enough to have this happen. I wonder what, I don't know. He never really commented on the guy. John Bush is the name of the now appeals court judge. He, sent Bush to the federal appeals court over objections from Democrats and civil rights groups that his pseudonymous blogging and other public comments made him unfit for the job. That would be lacking in judicial temperament. And I guess if he were to repeat himself, he would no longer be serving during a period of good behavior. And I suppose you could impeach him, but it's a Republican Senate. Anyway, that Republican Senate the other day confirmed Kentucky lawyer John Bush to a federal appeals court seat, handing another defeat to Democrats and civil rights groups that had hoped to tap into anger on the left over the confirmation of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch to block Bush. I don't know what they thought was going to happen, but it didn't. Bush faced criticism for his pseudonymous political blogging. His opponents pointed to his posts as proof that he lacked the temperament and objectivity needed to serve on the bench. In one frequently cited post, he wrote that the two greatest tragedies in our country were slavery, and that is one, and abortion, and that's not. Even a Republican who ended up voting to confirm Bush, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, told Bush at his confirmation hearing he was not impressed. But ultimately the Senate voted along party lines, 51-47, to confirm Bush to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, a sign that is going to be difficult for Democrats to stop the Trump administration from making progress in one area where the White House has had success so far, filling the 100-plus federal court vacancies across the country. Here is where it becomes important to retain the right to at least charge them the 30 hours every time they make one of these nominations. Want to do some math? 100 federal court vacancies. That's quite a few. And let's see. You got to file we figured this out once. You got to file for cloture. Even if you file right away, it still takes 25 hours at a minimum to get around to the cloture vote. Then you have the vote. Then you run the 30-hour clock. Then you have the other vote. The two votes together, say, account at a minimum for an additional half hour just on the voting. So what are we talking about? 25 hours plus then the 30 post-closure hours. And we'll throw in another hour there for procedural nonsense, chatter, and 2 15-minute votes. 56 hours per nomination. Got 100 vacancies. There's more than 100 vacancies. 5,600 hours. Divided, if we go around the clock, 24 hours. That's 233 days running the Senate 24/7 to fill those judicial slots. So what are we talking about here? Let's see. 365 days to a year. So, we're talking about, what is 233 days from now? Well, I guess at this point you're well into the second session of Congress. I mean, it's entirely possible, but of course they're never going to run the Senate 24/7. You're really talking about, an institution that runs perhaps 4 days a week, maybe on a tough day, a tough typical day, 10 hours perhaps in there, and considerably less than that on most days. For a vote-a-rama, it could go forever. But anyway, at 233 days, that's consuming the vast majority of this current Congress, and literally nothing else getting done. That just can't happen. Not to mention the fact that, like I said, they're not gonna go 24/7. It'll eat up the entirety of the Congress, and then also no other nominations, no executive nominations either. And it may be that they're comfortable with this because there's literally no legislative agenda to go to. They keep saying tax reform, but I don't think they have any idea where they're going with that either. All right. So what about this particular guy? No comment from Bush himself. This is the second judge that the Trump administration has had confirmed to the Sixth Circuit, which handles cases for Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Already has a majority Republican nominated judges. Let's see. Judge Amul Thapar? Trump's first lower court nominee was confirmed to the court in May. Another Sixth Circuit nominee, Michigan Supreme Court Justice Joan Larson, is pending in the Senate. Advocacy groups on the left have raised concerns about several of Trump's lower court nominees, but they've been especially focused on Bush. Bush, who was backed by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, I guess, so that's not surprising, said at his confirmation hearing that there were comments he wished he hadn't made in his blog posts. He wrote under the pseudonym of G. Morris, which I think is supposed to actually be Gouverneur Morris. He fancies himself a would-be founder, and wrote on a blog called Elephants in the Bluegrass. Get it? He's creative, too. And he vowed to treat all litigants who would come before him fairly. But his explanations and apologies weren't enough to win over Democrats, and groups on the left hoped that they could swing one or two Republicans, given Kennedy's remarks at the confirmation hearing. In the end, no Republicans broke ranks, couldn't even swing Kennedy on Kennedy's remarks. Not surprising. It's a sad day for the Senate and the American people when an individual like John Bush can be confirmed for a lifetime position on the federal bench. Vanita Gupta, president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, said in a statement, "Few nominees in history have had such a clear record of extreme and intemperate remarks. Federal judges must be impartial and fair, two qualities that Mr. Bush clearly lacks." Like our Attorney General, but that didn't stop anybody either. With Bush's confirmation, there are now 135 pending federal court vacancies, and at least 20 more seats are expected to open up in coming months. According to the federal judiciary, Trump has 22 nominees pending, and therein lies another of Trump's own problems, right? What do we have? 135 current vacancies, 22 nominations. He hasn't even picked a name out of a hat for 113 of them, and many more are supposed to come open. He has the opportunity to reshape the legislature, but I don't think he's got the time to do it, and he hasn't even got any ideas about who he would choose to help him do that. So it's a worrisome situation, but I don't think it's one that he's going to be able to take full advantage of, and he doesn't even care, to be honest. It's just not on his mind. I don't know what to tell you about that. All right. Let's see. I know there's a couple other things. There's a million other things that I should get to, and we could stay in the legal area. Although I do feel like, I don't know, we've let things grow cool on the self-pardon front, and maybe we shouldn't have. But I guess after the initial round of inquiries, everybody sort of, I guess they refocused when the healthcare bill came back up. But I guess you don't want to sleep on Trump and this idea that he might eventually pardon himself, although we can't really be sure what it is he'll be pardoning himself for. But there's a lot about that, a lot more about Jared Kushner that we never added to the record. So I'll make an executive decision here and see which direction we can go in the last half hour or so of the show. Okay, so in another attempt to try and keep you up to speed for the Monday show, in the closing half hour or so of what we've got to record today, let me turn to this piece. We've jumped ahead in time here, so we may be able to include some Sunday pieces in today's Monday podcast. This one, though, from Saturday, actually, I think it was probably pretty late in the day. It didn't come to my attention until later. The latest in the Trump-Russia saga, and this is sort of an interesting turn for events here. And I don't know what this represents exactly on behalf of the Russians, but this piece in the Washington Post, written by Andrew Roth, the Kremlin is done betting on Trump and planning how to strike back against U.S. sanctions. And, of course, once again, sanctions in the news. They seem to be extraordinarily important to Vladimir Putin. I wonder why. So let me take a look at this piece here. Your geopolitical nemesis, is suffering a political meltdown and says you're partly to blame. Angry legislators have slapped you with new sanctions, which their president says he will sign. What's a resurgent autocracy to do? In Moscow, it's time for some game theory. You know that famous phrase. Regardless of whether the Kremlin believes its own denials of interfering in the 2016 election, there is one undeniable truth. Russia is now Washington's greatest political foe. Understanding that President Trump is tied hand and foot, as one foreign policy hawk here puts it, Moscow is weighing options for retaliation. After a dalliance on the Trump train, Russia is once again channeling the ruthless realism that drives its political id and embracing its role as anti-hero. Okay, you think we're bad guys? We're going to be bad guys, and we'll see whether you like it or not, said Konstantin Eggert, a television political commentator describing the Kremlin thinking. Russia's decision on Friday to expel dozens and perhaps hundreds of American diplomats and other embassy staff marks the first salvo in retaliation to American sanctions that promises to be unpredictable and fraught with emotion. It is built on the frustrations of a Russian leader who perhaps thought that a Trump presidency would change everything, or could change everything is how they've written it here, and then watched those hopes dissolve in scandal and recriminations. The Russian establishment has been angry with the West before, but rarely so filled with contempt. It is far worse than several years ago when tensions rose to fever pitch over a pro-Western revolution in neighboring Ukraine, sold on Russian television as a nationalist uprising with echoes of fascism. No one was scared by the first 2014 sanctions. It was almost fun, said Andrei Kolesnikov, not Kalishnikov, but Kolesnikov, a veteran member of Vladimir Putin's press pool who co-wrote a 2000 book of interviews with the Russian president and traveled with him to Finland recently. Now there's a sense among Russian officials that everything is very serious. They're all looking at Vladimir Putin to see what to do. A common adage about Putin is that he is a canny tactician but a poor strategist. Greg, you hear that? A canny tactician but a poor strategist. He has taken the upper hand in conflicts with neighbors such as Ukraine and Georgia, and in so doing, surrounded himself with enemies. With Trump's growing political impotence, Russia's cyber intervention in the 2016 elections now seems similarly Pyrrhic. I don't think he knows how this ends, Kolesnikov says. The rules are now being made up on the fly. That does sound familiar. Predictions for autumn are frank. Economic war. If the bill is approved, and most probably it will be adopted, then we will inevitably enter the stage of what we call the Cold War, said Andrei Sidorov, an expert on international politics at Moscow State University, and one of several hawkish Russian analysts who sat down for a roundtable discussion at a state news agency recently. And the Cold War means various responses. That's not super specific, but okay. Putin has said they will depend on the version of the bill signed by Trump. Kommersant, a Moscow daily plugged into Kremlin and foreign policy circles, suggested some options. Cutting titanium or enriched uranium exports to the United States, which could harm the American airline and uranium industries. Blocking U.S. diplomatic initiatives such as a UN vote on a new North Korea sanctions, or on new North Korea sanctions, and cooperation in Syria, and seizing corporate property or even kicking out U.S. companies such as Google or Microsoft. Moscow knows it's outgunned in a trade war. It generally fights back by using its own market as a weapon, whether by imposing sanctions on European food imports in 2014, or in a more cynical moment in 2013, by banning Americans from adopting Russian children. You remember that one? Trump discussed the adoption ban and probably the associated sanctions, yes, of course, with Putin during an after-dinner meeting at the G20 summit in Hamburg earlier this month. We did discuss that, and the unlikelihood that actually came up really as a topic of discussion. And of course, even if it did, it was only cover for the rest of the sanctions. But it really did present a strange chronology. There would really have been no reason for that subject to have come up, unless, it actually speaks to an even greater level possibly of coordination in the collusion game, given that that's alleged to have been the subject of the June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower with his son. But okay. Anyway, of course, it's a very difficult time for Russia to do anything to harm the U.S. interests, unless Russia is ready to take steps which will harm ourselves, said Fyodor Lukyanov, chairman of the Council for Foreign Relations and Defense Policies, an influential group of Russian foreign policy experts. Hawks poring over the U.S. sanctions say Moscow needs to break the rules. It says that by no means shall sanctions apply to NASA projects, said Nikolay Platoshkin, a former Russian diplomat and professor at the Moscow University of the Humanities, referring to the bill passed by the Senate. Here we go, a perfect tip. Let them apply to NASA. Let American astronauts ride horses to the International Space Station. Okay. That won't work. I mean, don't ride horses to the International Space Station. You're not going to get there. You're going to kill the horse. It's a terrible idea. One idea voiced by the Kremlin, although maybe we should launch a horse there. Tell them it's supplies and it's a horse. And all right. Well, okay. No reason to fool around with that. One idea voiced by the Kremlin is to expand cooperation with Europe and possibly with China to counterbalance U.S. power. European leaders have expressed anger over the planned U.S. sanctions, saying they could backfire, dealing a blow to transatlantic efforts to curb Russian aggression against the Ukraine and sparking a trade war between Europe and the United States. Ooh, how interesting. That's a complexity. Of course, for our entire lives, we've held on to the hope that Europe is close to us and will align in its interest with us against the Americans, said Sidorov. But he was doubtful that the current crisis would bring about this schism. Meanwhile, dialogue between the countries is minimal. American diplomats can't get their Russian diplomats to agree on facts about Moscow's participation in the election hack, and expect Russians to accept the testimonials given by American intelligence chiefs as evidence of Russia's complicity. The Russians have demanded evidence, which the Americans say would compromise sources and methods of intelligence gathering. The impasse is total. Conflict is assured. Yeah, I don't see how you get past that one. That's likely true. Unlikely to find any way of convincing Russians that they did this if they're invested in believing that they didn't, and they will be invested in believing that they didn't, whether they really did or didn't. I mean, that's going to present a fairly sizable problem. It's followed up, by the way, with breaking news from Sunday. We did a little time warp here. You can follow along. You can probably figure out exactly what happened here. But around midday, a little bit, well, it's timestamped, so I can tell you. 1:24 p.m. on Sunday, we have this breaking tweet from the French press agency. 755 U.S. diplomats must leave Russia, President Putin announces. So I think, the previous story just mentioned something about dozens and perhaps hundreds, and now it's several hundred. 755 U.S. diplomats. I don't know whether there's been, I don't know how that figures in terms of historical precedents of expulsions, but it seems like an awfully high number. So they're clearly taking it seriously and angry about the possibility of sanctions. I don't even think we've gotten to the signature stage yet. I don't know. I've got mixed political feelings about this. It's kind of funny to see the breakdown as between Trump and Putin, but I also always sort of thought that it was being overestimated in this sense. Not, at first you'll recall, those of you who are longtime listeners, that I was a little bit doubtful about the role Russia may have played in all of this, and that it seemed so strange and anachronistic and weird to be worried about the Russians and covert operations again. But it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that there was some kind of a connection. The reason I am doubtful about it now, the doubts I'm expressing really are about Putin's abiding interest in Trump. I mean, I think he thought that he could get stuff out of Trump, maybe because he had leverage over him, maybe because he had compromising material to use against him, maybe just because he thought he was dumb, or maybe even further, because he thought he was dumb and for some reason he had succeeded in convincing Trump that Putin liked Trump and that Trump could become close to Putin, which nobody else had been able to do, for good or bad, or better or for worse, let's say, but good or for ill. I don't want to be like Trump himself, for good or for bad. But I guess I always sort of had the feeling that this wasn't exactly a reciprocal relationship, and I think we all probably were on the same page, that Trump really earnestly thought that he was going to become Putin's best friend. And the most generous interpretation you could give to Trump's flirtations with Russia was the one he was trying to get everybody to adopt, which of course makes me less inclined to believe it. But the one he was trying to get everybody to believe, to adopt, was that he was going to bring a real break from Cold War and post-Cold War chilly relations, that we were going to become closer and more cooperative with Russians, and that would be a good thing. And it would be a good thing if we felt like we were in good hands on this side of the equation. But unfortunately, we have a dolt doing our negotiating for us, and he keeps getting suckered. But I always had the feeling throughout all of this that what we would find if we got to the bottom of any Trump-Putin relationship, if there is one, and there doesn't have to be one for all of the collusion stories to still be true. But if there's a personal relationship, it was probably along the lines of, I've been able to do what no other president has been able to do. I'm going to get us on good terms with Russia. It's going to be fantastic. And on the other side of the coin is Putin saying, I can't believe I've convinced this moron that I'm his friend. This is going to be great. I wonder what I can get out of him before, if he ever comes to the realization that I've been playing him the whole time. I don't know. I'm not certain how this will work out. And I'm not certain, it'll be very interesting to see what Trump does and what he believes in terms of these sanctions or retaliation, and whether he thinks that, whether this brings him to the realization that Putin's been playing with him the whole time, or whether he starts to think, what can I do to repair the obviously close personal relationship we had. From that, it's obvious to me that we're close. Like when I was at the G20 dinner and I pointed at him and I pointed to myself and I made a little fist pump, duck face and a fist pump at him, and then he allowed me to come over there and talk to him. Clearly, we should be able to work this stuff out. I don't know how much of his own hype he believes. Maybe we'll find out once he gets back from the golf course. I don't know. In the meantime, we also have, back on the legislative front, we've got OMB Director, it's Mulvaney, right? Insisting that basically it is White House policy, they now say, White House policy that nothing else ought to be undertaken in Congress until the health care bill is dealt with. I mean, the treason care bill, of course, the one we're talking about. But, I mean, I don't know where they got the idea that the White House gets to call the shots with respect to the legislative calendar. But, I mean, I don't think I have to tell anybody about the whole 3 branches of government thing and how that doesn't really matter. But basically, it's a good question. So what? The OMB now says that the White House policy is you have to return to health care. I don't know that they will. There's no indication of it, but plenty more in the way of traditional press writing reminding people that, yes, the bill is back on the calendar. It can be retrieved. Stephen Dennis warning everybody that essentially it's true. He writes that this thing is parked and ready to go, and he's got 49 people ready to drive it. He still had, if you believe that those 49 votes translate and carry over, and that's a good starting point. But I guess it's possible that the politics and the situation has changed somewhat, and with the widespread relief at the defeat of the so-called skinny repeal amendment that led to the let's say, putting the bill on life support, now into suspended animation. I'm not certain that you can assemble, not positive that you can assemble all 49 of those votes again all that easily, but they're on the record, and so they may as well. It remains to be seen whether there's any way to get, probably not Collins, but maybe Murkowski on board, or whether by the same token there's some sort of panic that sets in, and Dean Heller says, I was there for you one time, you couldn't put the deal together, but I'm going to bolt, you won't find me on your side again. I don't know. We'll have to see what comes out of it and what they think they're offering. Anyway, all right. Well, let's see. Plenty more happening, of course, including some very interesting developments as between Anthony Scaramucci and Reince Priebus. I guess their feud escalated, and there was a brief moment on Sunday during which a friend, or who even knows, apparently even the relationship between the two was in dispute. Scaramucci, a guy who's variously his friend, his PR representative, though he denies that, a guy by the name of Arthur Schwartz, who I've never heard of, briefly burst onto the scene in a Twitter war with Jake Tapper over allegations Schwartz tried to hint at about Reince Priebus. I think it all got deleted in the end. But eventually it came around to him threatening to expose some sort of perhaps extramarital affair that Reince Priebus had been engaged in. And then, quite honestly, it's a little difficult to imagine, but I've seen worse, I guess. And I don't really care one way or the other, but just sort of interesting and indicative of the future I think we're in for with this Scaramucci character, that he's won his battle here, and he still has his people out there trying to stick it to Reince Priebus. I don't know how long this is going to go on. Anyway, we'll see whether that develops at all. Lots of other interesting material out there, probably for review later in the week, including a Brookings Institution look at the Kansas tax cut experiment, which we all know ended in dismal failure, but perhaps we ought to take a look at the specifics of their report, given that, despite Mulvaney's order that they return to health care, we're, of course, still got to have one eye on what congressional leaders say they want to do next, which is tax reform. And, of course, their model for tax reform is likely to be something awfully close to what Kansas tried and failed with just recently. Will they learn a lesson from that? Absolutely not. I promise you that they will come back with exactly the same kind of tax, quote-unquote, reform that Kansas just tried and flopped with and changed direction. And very true, they point out, for everybody's edification, in this report, we already knew it, it wasn't Democrats who were swept into power and reversed things on the taxes in Kansas. It was Republicans realizing what a disaster it was themselves and putting an end to it. All right. Also, other interesting material. For instance, in the Hill, writing on the question of how far does congressional investigative power go? A very interesting and lengthy article. Perhaps we ought to review that one in more depth next week. Just wanted to note for the record the reappearance in the traditional media of our good friend, Inherent Contempt. So another notch in the belt for the idea that Daily Kos is like reading the paper days, weeks, months, years, now decades in advance. You already know from having, those of you who are longtime readers of the site and longtime listeners of the show already know a little bit about Inherent Contempt. We'll have to dust that one off and remind everybody about it before the time comes. And let's see, just for fun to close things out, because it's a long weekend for me. It's so long this weekend, but a Monday for you. How about a fun story that Scott Anderson sent to me? This is a weird one. I don't know that this is ever going to connect the dot wise. This is a dot that's out there. It's humorous and interesting background, if nothing else. Just one more story of how ridiculous Donald Trump is in terms of his tastes and the sorts of things he tries to, the endeavors he tries to undertake. Here is the story of what might be the first Trump experiment in the brand licensing space. We all know about Trump vodka, which failed, the Trump steaks that failed. He's had some success, though, of course, in the real estate, that was his business, in real estate licensing of his name. And that stands to reason. I mean, he's had the most success he's had in business has been in real estate. So the licensing should likewise, although it's possible I wonder has he made more money off of The Apprentice or his real estate deals? I guess if we might as well just borrow a trick from him. Of course, he thinks he won the popular vote if you just discount all of the illegal votes for Hillary Clinton. But if you discount all the illegal money and money laundering that's gone on in his licensing of real estate in that part of his career, then I guess The Apprentice is worth more to him. Anyway, this goes back in time I don't know, how did you find this, Scott? You'll have to tell me about that. How Donald Trump got Cadillac to build him the most opulent limo ever. And there's a lot to this. There's all sorts of elements. There's the fact that if you take a look inside this limo, and you can do that the most opulent, I'm going to build the most beautiful limo ever that everybody's going to want. It's a horrific nightmare. Granted, it's outdated. This is from the 80s, so there's going to be that. But if you take a look at what he thinks is like the most luxurious interior, it's a garbage dump. It's an absolute trash heap. And you can see that it was cobbled together. And part of the story of it being cobbled together, that it was custom made, at least the prototype that was built. There's a mafia element to it. There's a corporate just chiseling and grifting element to it. There's the you have no taste whatsoever element to it. And then there's the whole he runs away from everything angle to it. Let's see what we can get shoehorned in here. This is from Jalopnik, which I know nothing about, and I don't even know what it looks like. They're just sort of a car, an automotive site, and as Jalop from Jalopy would probably suggest, Donald Trump, it begins, often suggests that his greatest asset is his name, which he personally has valued anyway, at over $3 billion. It's now worth jack squat. This is, by the way, written up in March of 2016, so at the beginning of his candidacy, or immediately before even. No, he announced in 15, right? Okay. What's less commonly known, I'm lost in time already. He's already had the first primaries and caucuses by March of last year. Donald Trump often suggests that his greatest asset is his name, blah, blah, blah. What's less commonly known is that the very first time he slapped his name on any product, it was on a pair of Cadillac limousines known as the Trump Executive Series and the Trump Golden Series. Of course, gold, right? He got Cadillac to build them for him, sorta. There's an angle on that. By agreeing to order a run of limos he never bought. He cheated. Trump's automotive ambitions were mentioned in his well-known ghost-written book, Trump, The Art of the Deal, the famous one, in a section called The Trump Car. It says this about it: a decision has been made to go into production on 2 Cadillac body limousines using my name. The Trump Golden Series will be the most opulent stretch limousine ever made. The Trump Executive Series will be a slightly less lavish version of the same car. Neither one has come off the line yet, but the folks at Cadillac Motors Division recently sent over a beautiful gold Cadillac Alante as a gift. Perhaps they felt I needed more toys to keep me busy. Yeah, sure. The, quote, most opulent stretch limousine ever made? Even then, he had a gift for hyperbole. Soon, that pair of custom Trump-branded limousines did come off the line and was unveiled at the Limousine and Chauffeur Show in, guess where, Atlantic City in 1988. During the presentation, here's what Donald Trump had to say, according to an issue of Limousine, Charter, and Tour from that year. Well, this began about 2 years ago when John and I were in Palm Beach. And I was saying, John, what Cadillac ought to do is come up with a design for an incredible limousine that has the big headroom and all of the assets that anyone could want. A typical Trump project. You know what you should do? What somebody who's in the business of actually doing this should do is design the most amazing, beautiful, world-class limousine with all the stuff that I like. And you should just do that. And that's his plan. Later, I got a call from John, and he said, would you like to get involved with this design project? I said, I know nothing about cars except what I personally like. I thought he was a man. How can an alpha man not know about cars? That wasn't until later. I said, I know nothing about it except what I personally like. But between myself, Cadillac, and John Staluppi at Dillinger, we went ahead and we designed the car. More on that in a second. We built one, and we saw a lot of things we didn't like. So we went back several times, and this is what we produced. I think we probably designed the ultimate limousine to be found anywhere in the world. You can see the kind of quality there is. We left nothing out. I'm very honored that they built me, the first one, and frankly, I deserve it. I am really honored. I am very honored, and I would like to thank Cadillac and everyone else involved. So the best limo in the world didn't exist, is what they're saying, so Trump made it because he deserved it, or so he said. Now, check this part out. The John Staluppi he refers to is a businessman, yacht and car collector, and someone with alleged ties to organized crime. The New York Daily News reported the FBI at one time identified Staluppi as a member of the Colombo family. Staluppi ran the company Dillinger Coach Works, named after exactly who you think it's named after, John Dillinger, the gangster, which did the conversion work on the limos. The Smoking Gun has a more extensive explanation of the supposed mafia ties of Trump's partners. And that one, by the way, the Smoking Gun piece was also sent to me by Scott, and that's extensive on that. That would take forever to get through. But I mean, we can say this, even just saying, well, he's alleged to have some ties to organized crime, that's a huge whitewash of the issue. The guy is backwards and forwards one of the biggest gangsters operating in New York at the time, and alleged to be the richest member of the mafia of any of them. It's very interesting. Anyway, they waltz right past that. Never mind, for the time being, that he's mixed up with mafia ties in this. The limos were pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a 1988 era Donald Trump, or today's Donald Trump, for that matter. Luxurious, over the top, and with gold slathered over everything that stayed still for just a moment. There are some pictures in here, and it is, well, even by 1988 standards, it's one of the cheesiest things you've ever seen in your life. These limos, it says, had rosewood interiors and were equipped with a fax machine. Well, at the time, that was something. TV and VCR. You should see it's a dumpy little combo unit that they stuck in a cabinet. It's awful. Anyway, a paper shredder, writing desks, a pair of early NEC cell phones, a cabinet with glasses, and a delightfully named Perma-Pub liquor dispensing system. The exteriors were also suitably Trumpified with larger grills, with vertically oriented slats, sort of vaguely Rolls-Royce-ish. An enlarged greenhouse, as they call it, for more headroom. As they say, likely to provide arm and equipment clearance for the intense hair maintenance Trump required. A large stainless steel B-pillar panel, don't even know what that means. And on the Golden Series, gold-plated trim all over the place, including gold-striped tires by Vogue. And Vogue, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. It's not the magazine, is it? They don't make tires. Anyway, I guess it's a boutique outfitter. Anyway, the upshot of this thing, and I'll include these two articles. You should take a look at it. What's really interesting is that the deal he strikes with Cadillac actually is one in which he agrees. They agree to take this prototype to production on Trump's promise to purchase 50 units of this limousine, which I guess is enough to make it worth it for them to do, or maybe between that and the publicity they think they'll get, it's enough for them to do. What would he do with 50 limousines? Well, he wanted, of course, one or two or more for himself, and one probably to keep at each of his houses, etc. But he also wanted a fleet of cars to ferry high rollers back and forth between the New York area and the Atlantic City casinos. It made some business sense. But then, of course, those casinos end up going bankrupt, and who knows how much earlier before declaring bankruptcy they were no longer able to pay for those ridiculous those crazy limos, after all. At any rate, he ends up backing out of the deal and walking away. Thankfully, they hadn't actually produced those limos. He picks up one and says he's going to give it to his father, but he never ends up paying for the other 49 limos that they produce, or they never bothered to produce, but he never bothers to come up with the money for it. So I guess, thankfully, I don't think General Motors would have noticed, but they never bothered making anything. The whole deal falls apart. It's all talk, just like everything else he ever does in his life. All right, so I think we have fulfilled our obligations for our Monday show. I hope that we have informed and entertained once again, even though we weren't on live, and hopefully nothing blows up, and I mean that literally, between Sunday evening when we wrap this up and Monday when we finally get to broadcast it to you. One or two other pieces of information I'll just slip in since I don't have the after show preview for Monday's show, though no doubt it will be fantastic, and they will keep you up to date on all the things that may have happened in between my taping and real time. How about this little bit here? You remember that I mentioned to you that I had seen the AFP saying that 755 American diplomats were being expelled from Russia. And I did wonder, thinking to myself at the time, that is a lot. Do we have 755 American diplomats in Russia? We could. It's a big country. Who knows? I got no idea. But Michael McFaul has an idea. He, of course, the former United States ambassador to Russia. Matt Ford, I guess, tweeting the same question. We have 755 diplomats in Russia? Michael McFaul answering, we don't have 755 American diplomats in Russia. Of course, Donald Trump says, well, not now, we don't. Putin kicked them all out. I don't think we ever did. That's very interesting and weird. Boy, you got to double check everything in this world, and I guess for the foreseeable future as well. Thanks for listening today. We'll be back on Tuesday with a live show and checking in with Greg Dworkin once again. And now stay tuned for the after show.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks again, and I guess I'll use this time to remind you that you, too, can become a monthly sponsor of the Kagro in the Morning Show to keep us going, keep us in working equipment and apps, and pay the people who help us out on this show at patreon.com. Patreon.com/KagroX brings you to the correct page. Thanks for listening.